Hello everyone, I hope I find you all well. Tonight I'm going to take a quick look at this absolutely fantastic, contemporary, up-to-date version of Spinosaurus aegypticus from PNSO. They have named this figure Essien, which is a tradition which is kind of started by Rebo. They started giving their figures names and PNSO have kind of run with it. I tend to give my figures their own names, which I'll make up, but it might just be me. So I know this is a smaller figure. I don't have many Spinosaurus figures in my collection. These are the most contemporary ones I have in the background here to compare it to, and this one is by no means the smallest. I know for its size, some of you are concerned about the price. However, what I will say for this figure, and I hope I will demonstrate it to justice through the video, is that of all of the figures I have, this is by far and away one of the highest quality ones of them all. It's up there with the Eofauna figures, and that is high praise indeed coming from me, because Eofauna is my favourite brand. So, taking a look at this figure here, I'll start with the head, as is always proper. So, of course, yes, we always have larger scale detail than would appear in real life, but it's to give a great impression of the appearance of, obviously where the scales would be larger and where they would be smaller on the body of the animal. And this suits me perfectly fine. As you can see, they're beautifully sculpted, they're not overcut or anything like that. This head really is exquisitely detailed. I mean, the quality, the individuality of the size of the scales and the flow of the scales across the face is just absolutely phenomenal here. And what is a really nice touch on this figure, which I've not seen on any other Spinosaurus figure and is a really intelligent move by PNSO, is the fact that the nostrils are raised up, which is, I've never seen this done on a Spinosaurus figure before, and it's a very thoughtful touch and also quite likely on an aquatic animal. So the detailing around the back of the head is a little crocodilian. I know some might be concerned about might be a little bit of shrink wrap in here, but again, that's not something I'm particularly concerned about on this figure. There's lovely sort of plain red crest going on. The jaws are beautifully done. The overall sort of texture of the paint on the figure is quite matte. However, it is a little bit more glossy across the face and on the inside of the mouth, as you can see here. You can see it shining in the light, which is a lovely touch and just further establishes the quality of this figure. They've taken a leaf out of Papo's book in terms of the design of the articulated jaw here, and that they've got flesh from the upper jaw going to the lower to give it a more sort of realistic look here. And although you can see a bit of a seam on the underside of the jaw, it really does not detract from the figure, as they often do. This is really, really nicely done. It's one of the best done I've ever seen in terms of how it moves and how it looks, the overall aesthetic of the figure. And this figure looks just as good with the figure with the mouth closed as it does with it open, and that often isn't the case. I'm looking at you with that one, collector. Collector figures do unfortunately seem to have taken a bit of a step backwards in terms of the quality and design recently. So looking inside the jaws here, you can see there's detail on the roof of the mouth there, including those little sort of nostrils on the roof of the mouth. You can see that because of the way they've designed the mouth, the insert of the mouth there, it's got a very deep, sort of realistic, cavernous look to the throat. The tongue's very flat and crocodilian, which seems to be quite likely, as the throats of dinosaurs, the hyoid bones seem to be quite tubular, like a crocodile, from what we know, so PNSO have extrapolated that detail to Essien here. Really, really beautifully done. Well, this figure, the pose of the figure, obviously has the head acutely turned to the left, and the only problem with that is that it means from the right hand side you can't really display it from the right hand side, so you get all this beautiful detail which you don't get to ever really appreciate unless you have the figure in your hand. Now, I've barely had this figure out of my hand since I got it because I love it so much. I'm just going to have a quick look at some of the detail on the right hand side here. I like the way they've elaborated the understructure of the spine with larger, flatter scales, sort of interspersed with these much smaller, more pebbly ones here. That's a nice touch. And another thing about the detail here is the way the skin is stretched. Now, if you look at the scales on this side and along the side of the neck, it's a little bit difficult to demonstrate. You'll have to take my word for it. They're much smaller and more compressed where the body is twisted to the other side. So it gives a great sense of realism there. See a couple of rolls and crinkles in the flesh there. Gives it a great sense of realism and a great sense of movement. Beautifully done. Some big ornamental scales interspersed among the smaller ones. I love the way the skin's pulled tight. And of course, where there needs to be more flexibility in the skin, the scales are smaller again. It's really, really well thought out. Now I know the pose is in the sort of knuckle walking pose because, I mean, we know that they didn't walk on the knuckles, but obviously it's a bit difficult to perceive how else they might have walked. I mean, we're still kind of in early days as to understanding this species as it is, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. Looking at the underside of the hand here, you can see that beautiful big thumb claw, and all the claws are all folded under. It reminds me a little of a giant anteater or a sloth or something, the way these claws are curled under, beautifully sculpted. Like most sort of dinosaur skin impressions show, they've gone for larger scales on the underside, big sort of square tabular scales on the underside, which is absolutely beautifully done. It's a nice transition down the chest here. As you can see, there's very few noticeable seams on the figure. It really is very, very high quality. And there's also the legal information on the underside is very faint. It's there, but it's not obvious, so it's not going to show up in photographs, and it certainly does not detract from the figure at all. The anatomical and muscular detail is absolutely phenomenal. So we've got this bulging muscle here, which is all sort of tensed up where the leg is moved forward here, and these lovely little wrinkles and folds. Plenty of dinosaur figures have got all the wrinkles and folds in the right places, but this is one of the few figures I've seen where the sheer amount of thought, the forensic detail that's gone into these has been to this extent. It really is extraordinary. Again, beautiful detail on this. The hands, the claws are quite plain, and the claws on the hands aren't too sharp. The claws on the feet are, they're absolutely lethal. This really is not designed as a plaything for children. Those claws are incredibly sharp on the underside. This is definitely designed more as a display item. It's at the price point it's at anyway. It's probably not going to end up in, you know, a child's toy box as it is, but it's just something to be aware of. Those claws are quite sharp, but as you can see, beautifully sculpted and detailed, fantastic webbed feet going on here. Absolutely stunning stuff, detail along the legs. Another thing I like about this figure is it's got the most detailed cloacal vents of any dinosaur figure I've ever seen. They really have gone for the crocodilian look with this, and having, you know, there's been a dinosaur backside discovered quite recently, and although it was on a totally different, totally unrelated genus, it was Psittacosaurus, it does seem to indicate that dinosaurs did have very sort of standard squamate cloacal vents, and this is what PNSO have run with here, and it looks fantastic. This really is the most detailed cloacal vent I've ever seen on a dinosaur. Hats off to them for that. As you can see, the tail is lovely and fleshy and thick. There's fantastic fat deposits under there. Beautifully designed. You can see the muscles under here, and it's just honestly an absolutely outstanding figure. The overall shape and proportions of it are very much in line with the most contemporary skeletal reconstructions. And looking along the tail here, you can just see the slight understructure of the spines on the underside of this magnificent great long tail here. It's a fantastic looking figure. The paintwork is absolutely stunning. It's one of the best painted PNSO figures or dinosaur figures I've ever actually seen. It really is up there with, you know, the best Papo figures. You know, if Papo had managed to pull something off like this on their lovely big Spinosaurus, and no offence to this paint job, but it's not what appeared in the catalogue, then, you know, that figure would have looked so much better too. This really is a phenomenal high quality figure. I love the way they've gone for these sort of oranges and yellows and golds. This gold highlight along the back of the fin sort of starts at the neck here, but it's very, very faint, and then really glows along the top of the spine and down the tail. It reminds me a little of a sun rising over clouds or over mountains. It really pops. It's a beautiful touch. Generally, really, really nicely done. So, like I say, it's not the smallest Spinosaurus I have in my collection, and when you compare it to something like this sadly retired little collector Spinosaurus, which was released very quickly following the last lot of research on Spinosaurus, you can see the difference in the quality is absolutely incredible. I mean, collector figures do tend to be a lot sort of cheaper. You know, they're very impressive for how quickly they get them out, but, you know, it was a fantastic figure for the time, but you can see it's totally eclipsed by Essien here. Of course, I also have the favourite Spinosaurus, which I was lucky enough to be able to acquire. But again, in terms of detailing, in terms of anatomical accuracy, and in terms of size, the PNSO figure is much, much larger again, and far, far more accurate. I do like the stand that you get with the favourite figure, however. I've got no doubt they will release another version of their Spinosaurus at some point. It does drop off if you do that. And then finally, of course, we have a humongous Papo river monster here. And it's roughly about twice the size of Essien. So, I mean, yes, whilst there is also, this is a fantastic figure to have. At least Papo had the idea that such a large aquatic animal would perhaps use the tail for propulsion and stuck this, what was a rather controversial sort of eel-like fin on it at the time. Proved not to be too wide of the mark. So, I mean, Papo figures are fantastic figures to have, but really, as Spinosaurus figures go, this one is by far and away the nicest one that's out there at the minute. I know there is a beautiful GR Toys one out there, which I would like to have. And I'm greatly looking forward to the Mesozoo one as well. The Mesozoo one, they've gone for a bipedal pose, which at this stage also seems equally as plausible, and it's very clever how they've done it, so it'll look fantastic next to this figure. And I hope you've enjoyed having a closer look at Essien here with me. I hope if you're a little undecided about this figure, or if you felt the price wasn't quite worth it, that I've reassured you, because I wouldn't be without this figure. This is going to be displayed alongside my Eofauna figures, and that is high praise indeed. And I really hope to see you in the next video.